Hello, quilting friends. Happy Feature Friday, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me in my sewing studio today. Instead of quilting with a design on the quilt top I've got on my frame, I am actually quilting with my channel locks today, and I wanted to show you how I was doing that. If you've got a mid-level or top-of-the-line Butler robotic system, you've got channel locks, and they are built right into your robotic system. They lock your motor into place so you can get those perfectly straight vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines on your quilt. So I decided I wanted to make quilting that looked like plaid on this quilt top, and so I am using my channel locks to straight stitch, and I am changing my thread out often to get different colors stitched out too. So I want to go ahead and show you just how I'm doing this and what my plan is, and just take you along for the ride. I'll switch you around. And here is the quilt top, and you probably can see best on the orange. So I've got black and purple stitching kind of in a little group here with a black line, a purple line, and a black line. And then I've got a line of white stitching and a line of orange stitching. And that kind of repeats itself all the way down the quilt at this point. I've got one little area that I've got left that I need to put the orange and white stitching in. So we'll do that together. But I have marked kind of little marks along the edge of my batting so I know where to place my lines, and that's kind of helped me keep my spacing consistent as I've gone down my quilt. I kind of measure and mark things as I go. Your channel locks are in your system in your home screen. Now the layout box you guys see here on my display is just my set safe area. There's no need to set a layout box to use your channel locks. You don't go into patterns, and you don't even go into edit. You go straight into your home feature. And your channel locks are over here on the right hand side. And we've got a horizontal channel lock, a vertical channel lock, and a diagonal channel lock. And it kind of works a little bit opposite in my brain until I got the hang of it. With your horizontal channel lock, if you lock horizontally, you cannot move your machine horizontally. You can't move from right to left. You can only move forward and backward on that point where your machine is. So you get a nice straight line vertically. If we unlock our horizontal lock and use our vertical lock that goes up and down, I can no longer move my machine up and down. I can only move it from right to left. And this is how I've been doing the quilting on this quilt top, using this vertical channel lock, so I can only do horizontal lines. We also have our diagonal channel lock, and this one you actually get to set the degrees of the angle you want to stitch out. You have a little box that has a degree reading in it, and you can touch on that and you'll get a keypad. And that keypad's going to allow you to put in whatever degree angle you're needing for your quilt top. So let's say I want a 60-degree angle. I can type in 60 and hit my green check mark. And then when I engage the lock feature, I now am able to move my machine on a 60-degree angle to stitch that out. So you've got your channel locks available over here on the right-hand side. So I want to go ahead and just finish up this little area here. I've got a white line and then an orange line to stitch out just down here at the bottom of the quilt. So we're going to go ahead and do that together. I'm going to put you guys up on the tripod so that you can hopefully see everything, including the mess that I have in my sewing room. And we'll get started. Now I did mark out those points. So you saw the two little red marks that I had down here at the very end of my quilt. My white line goes first. I've got white thread in my machine. And I'm going to line my needle up just with that little red mark and pull my bobbin thread up to the surface. That way I've got that in my hand and I don't have to worry about that tangling up on the back side of my quilt. I'm gonna realign with that point and drop my needle down into my fabric just so I make sure that I'm where I wanna be. I'm on that point. And then I'm gonna go ahead and engage my vertical channel lock. Remember, that's what I want so I can stitch horizontal lines. I'll turn the stitching on my machine, and then I can just guide my machine from left to right across my frame, and it's going to stitch out my horizontal line for me. When I get to the end, I'll turn my stitching off. I'll turn off my vertical channel lock so I have free movement of my machine, and I can go ahead and pull my bobbin thread back up to the surface. Now that that's done, here's where it might get tedious for some of you. I don't actually mind rethreading my machine, I guess because I do it so often. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my thread off and put my orange on. I guess I get pretty speedy at this because I'm used to rethreading my machine, but if you like to quilt in one color and use the same color often, you might not get as speedy. And I'm very lucky to have my threading here at the front of my machine, and I don't have to reach all the way back at the back of my machine to kind of reach my spool or anything. That does make things a lot easier. So I'm just gonna rethread. Some tips and tricks that I've kind of learned as I've worked through this quilt top and doing this method. Don't lean on your roller bars while you're doing your stitching, because you will get a wobbly line instead of a perfectly straight line, because you're putting pressure on this and it's changing that line on your quilt top. It's changing a little bit, so even though you're supposed to be getting a nice straight line, it gets a little funny looking when you're leaning on your roller bar. That's totally my fault. I did pick it out a couple times that I did that, and there are some wobbly lines on my quilt because I wasn't paying attention and I was leaning on my roller bar. In the same kind of vein, don't push on your quilt top when you're trying to do your straight line stitching, because if you're pushing on your quilt top, it's going to cause a wobbly line too. So just kind of let the machine do its thing as you're guiding it across, and trust that the robotic system is going to give you a nice beautiful line, and don't try to help it along, because helping it with your hand on your quilt top is going to give you a wobbly line too. And the whole point of this is to have those beautiful straight lines. And I kind of ruined a couple of beautiful straight lines by trying to help things. So don't help it, let it do its thing. The other thing I learned is, I tried to stitch out one color all at one time and then go roll my quilt back and start another color as I went down. And that kind of messed with the tension of my quilt on my frame a little bit. So where I thought I was going to get perfectly straight lines distanced equally from each other, when I re-rolled my quilt, maybe it didn't get as tight as I had it the first time, and so the distance between the lines didn't turn out quite the way I thought it would. So work on one section at a time with all of your colors, then roll your quilt and work on the next section. So I have a couple of sections where like my black and purple threads aren't spaced out as nicely as I would like them to be, because of the way I had rolled the quilt. So lessons learned, and I hope those are helpful hints for you guys. Okay, I've got my orange thread on here. I'm going to realign with the second point that I marked on my batting. And I'm going to once again drop my needle down and back up into that little red point to bring my bobbin thread to the surface. I'm going to realign and drop my needle back into that point, engage my vertical channel lock so I can stitch horizontally, turn my stitching on, and just lightly guide my machine across my quilt. I'm not leaning on my roller bars, and I'm not touching my quilt top, so I get those perfectly straight lines. And when I'm at the end, I just turn my stitching off. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my channel lock, and then I can bring my bobbin thread back up to the surface to clip those threads. All right, and now I'm gonna bring you guys down so you can actually see how that turned out. And here are our nice little stitching lines in white and orange all the way across the bottom. So that's the start of this. I've got my horizontal lines kind of across my quilt from top to bottom. But now I need my lines that'll run kind of vertically across the quilt to create the plaid. Now I do have my channel lock where I could create nice lines in the opposite direction. But because this quilt is long, I would have to start and stop every section of my table. And I don't want little start and stop points throughout the quilt. So what I'm actually going to do is take the quilt off the frame and turn it on its side, and then use my horizontal channel lock or my vertical channel lock to stitch horizontal lines that will be full and complete all the way across my quilt. So I'm going to switch my quilt and we'll come back. Here we are with the quilt flipped on the frame. The top of the quilt is now up here on the left. The bottom of the quilt is down here on the right, and I have done some of my straight line stitching in this section with my channel locks. I've done my purple and black lines here and here, so you can see that it's starting to create that plaid look. I have one line of white stitching here, and I am lined up and ready to go with my next line. I've got my channel lock locked here so I can get my horizontal line, and I can just pull across my quilt. What I love about being able to flip my quilt on its side is that I can get this nice long line across my whole quilt without having to stop and roll my quilt in between. So it's really nice that I was able to flip it on the side and I get this nice solid long line with my channel lock. And I get to the end and I can turn my stitching off and turn my channel lock off. And now I've got another line to my plaid in place. So it's time to switch over to my orange thread and complete this section with all of my thread colors, and then I can roll. You can see right here's one of those little wobbles from me leaning on my frame or touching my quilt top while I was doing my straight stitching. So just remember, hands off everything but the handlebars of your machine when you're trying to do this, so that you end up with these real pretty consistent lines. You want this. And then here's one of those places where it wobbled and I got too close, and that's where I learned that I needed to do all of my colors in one section at a time instead of doing, you know, my black thread, roll my quilt and go all the way down my quilt and do all my black thread and then come back and do all my purple threads. Do all of your colors at one time and you'll get a far more consistent look because you're not worrying about the tension of your quilt top changing. So you get more consistent look. Those look really great, even spacing right there. So mistakes happen. This is definitely a learning experience for me. I have never quilted like this before with my channel locks. I think it's going to turn out great. And I can't wait to keep going on this. Thank you guys so much for joining me as I experiment on another quilt with my robotic system. Sometimes you just want something a little bit different than a stitched out design and you want to get a little creative. Why not give it a go with your channel locks? Thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you guys real soon.